My name is Gasia, Mikaelian. I'm an anchor and reporter at KTVU Fox 2 News in the San Francisco Bay Area. Today we're going to talk about how COVID-19 is affecting specifically multi-generational households. You might have grandparents, adult children, and little ones living under the same roof. We'll talk about the safety of that. I'd like to welcome to this conversation Maura Horton. You're the Chief Community Officer for Juniper, which is a content and community hub for at-risk and aging populations. Thanks for being with us, Maura.
Oh, thanks for having me and talking about such an important topic.
Of course, really important any day of the week, but especially so during this pandemic. You dug deep into a recent Kaiser Family Foundation study on multi-generational households and the effect the pandemic is having on them. What were some of the biggest takeaways for you?
Yeah, so one of the biggest takeaways is 3.3 million seniors are living in a multi-generational home and are potentially at risk when the kids go back to school. It's a really large population, and we really have to try to make sure that we take that into consideration when we do talk about, going back to school or what that looks like, and going back to preschool, not just elementary and high school, but preschools as well.
Is it pretty safe to say that, my boys are now 10 and 11, but I remember back when they were 2, 3, 4 years old, they put everything in their mouth, they borrow their friend's cap. There was really no way to keep them apart.
Yeah, it's very difficult because, impulse controls are limiting at those ages. So we definitely just have to rehone it and refocus it and make sure that we're all doing a great job. And, a lot of school districts are allowing parents to make the choice of complete virtual learning or semi-learning from home. So if you know your child the best, you have to make those decisions for what works for your family. And that includes a multi-generational family.
Many parents are very stuck with the idea that certainly it might be safer just to keep the children at home 100% of the time. However, very few households, especially here in the Bay Area, have the luxury of a full-time stay-at-home parent. How do you suggest that we balance that concern about safety with the practicality of, look, I have to go to the office now?
Yeah, it's really difficult, and every family has to make, unfortunately, very difficult decisions internally. And if you are, hopefully you're surrounded by people that can help you. It's going to take a community and a village, and whether that's getting your kids and other kids to school at the same time, or picking up, or staying at home on certain days where you're just not sure that you can make it. We all have to make those internal struggles, but it's going to take a village, whether it is a multi-generational village that you're living in or your community around you and your support system.
I think about my situation. I'm relatively, healthy, mid-40s. My husband's about the same. How is the concern different for someone, let's say my parents who are in their mid to upper 70s? How is it much more concerning for them versus someone like me?
Yeah, so obviously the CDC has put out, what the risk factors are for the aging population or persons with disabilities, that they're just at more of an exposed risk. And so having people in different environments really elevates that risk. And so we want them around for a long time. Unfortunately, we're losing whole generations that are able to give us such breadth of wisdom and knowledge that we have to protect them as well. So however you can do that, and whether that's living in your own home and wearing a mask in your own home if the kids are going back to school, or trying to separate mealtime if you're living in a multi-generational home, there are ways that you can still social distance within your own home.
I imagine that you're hearing from a lot of people through Juniper who are in the sandwich generation, have young children of their own, might be living with or caring for their elderly parents. It can be very difficult to do that under normal circumstances. What are some of the added stressors that may be coming in now due to the pandemic for those people who are really squarely in the middle of the sandwich generation?
Yeah, I think there's just a fear on every level, right? We just don't know. There's so much unknown. And so we want to protect our loved ones as much as possible. And we're not sure how to do that. I mean, we all have tools that we've been given, but in that sandwich generation, you're really kind of stuck in the middle sometimes, trying to figure out what's best for everyone that's involved in the situation. So, and it ebbs and flows. We have to read as much as we can possibly, and again, try to make our own family decisions, because what might work for us might not work for someone else. And so you have to have a comfort level about that as well.
Do you talk much to the community through Juniper about mental health and well-being as much as physical?
That's the best question. And yes, that is paramount in what we discuss, because mental health can't be overlooked, whether it is from the elder generation or even from kids going back to school. We're noticing that a lot of people in the senior population are becoming more introverts and more isolated. And there's even websites that I've seen created where it's called Isolation Kills, and people are promoting pictures of their loved ones of what they look like pre-COVID and now post-COVID, with them not being able to see them. And so those are really hard to look at, to talk about, but it's so important that the mental aspects be discussed. Physical health isn't the only thing that's being affected with the pandemic.
How do you propose that we sort of, crack into that conversation? Because for many people of my parents' generation, mental health was something that was certainly never talked about, that perhaps wasn't even acted upon when it began to suffer. Here all of a sudden you have your adult child saying, "Hey, mom, let's talk about your mental health." Mom may not be so, open to that conversation. Can you help us get there?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, we have to be more intuitive, right? So if you're having conversations, whether they're on the phone or in person, you have to read people's body languages as well. Make sure that people are staying active, and whether that's just going out to get the mail, but they getting out of their situation and just seeing a new scenery is really important. Making sure that people that are at home and can do exercise do exercise, because people are losing the ability and the strength, and it's very hard to get that back after some time. So there's many touch points, and we have to pick up the cues, especially if people aren't open to talking about it. But there's nonverbal cues that we can pick up. And if you're not living with someone, I think what's really important is to check in with them in the morning and at night, just to hear their tone of voice. You don't have to ask the leading question. Just say, what was your favorite part of today? Don't say, okay, are you feeling sad? Just ask, indirect questions that might get you to that answer.
I know a lot of people, I'm guessing you and I are, sort of in that same group of, we're pretty much right in the middle of our professional lives. We, if we're very lucky, we get to do what we've been doing as a career for maybe 15 or 20 more years. I've definitely heard that some older Americans who may have been considering retirement soon, and they're just seeing their jobs disappear in front of them because either they can't be, they can't work in person anymore. The work that they used to do doesn't translate well to online or at home sort of work. Can you tell me a little bit about how that loss of profession, that sort of loss of agency in the workplace can also affect someone?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely affects everyone right now, right? The employment numbers are very alarming, and we all are concerned whether we're still holding on to our jobs or not. I think in the back of our minds there's a fear, but what I think people have to understand is we have to understand what our purpose is as well. And so we may have to shift and have different employment or no employment, but that doesn't mean we can't have purpose in life and try to contribute in other ways. And especially through the pandemic, to try to find a purpose, whether that is volunteering, calling on people to check in, just doing things remotely, whether it's making meals, we all can find a purpose. And it might not be our initial purpose, pre-COVID, but we can all develop a new purpose post-COVID.
What's your biggest concern specifically for older Americans right now?
Yeah, again, I think you touched on it, but it's the mental health and the physical health of whether they are staying mentally healthy and physically healthy and active. It's such a big concern right now for so many, because even as most of us are starting to enter back in, whether we're in phase 1 or 2 or 3 in some parts of the United States, the older generation is not. So they're still staying home and still being very fearful, and fear can lead to isolation, and that's super harmful.
And, as you speak, I'm reminded that they were sort of the first ones to be affected, and they're going to be the last ones to get out of it. We did see a number of companies and businesses make some changes to tailor life to the senior. We used to see senior hour at the grocery store, things like that. Here and there, that's going away. If you're speaking directly to seniors right now, what do you say to them when it comes to staying physically safe and staying mentally well?
Yeah, pick your times of where you're going and what you're doing. If you can, send someone if it's a caregiver. I wish that during the pandemic they allowed caregivers the same latitude of going to the earlier shopping hours as they did the elderly, because those are the people that are still entering people's homes and possibly adding transmission. So pick your hours is for sure, or if someone else can do it, let it go. You're not going to not be as great as you are just because someone else gets your groceries for you. So let the things go that you can farm out if you're definitely feeling in a vulnerable space. And as far as mental health goes, try to read, stay active, communicate with people. It's really hard to internalize, but if you're feeling like you haven't talked to someone in a couple of days, reach out to someone, and that could be a neighbor, and neighbors can help just as much. If there's so many seniors that don't have family living immediately with them or around them. And so if you are a neighbor and you notice that someone hasn't gone out, leave a little note at their door, or flowers, or just, fresh strawberries, something. Just let them know that you're looking out after them.
One of my good friends here at the station, she and I have sort of talked about the fact that we're trying to help protect and do the best thing for our elderly parents. She is hearing from hers, as I'm hearing from mine. I'm fine. I can run to the grocery store for lettuce. Don't drive all the way out here just to bring me groceries. How do you deal with that perhaps stubborn elderly loved one who insists, no, they can still do it. But in your heart, you're thinking, yeah, but you shouldn't.
Right. That's a hard line to straddle, right? Because the person inside of us says, we're just going to do it. But the person that's receiving it doesn't want their independence taken away. And so we have to honor that as well. And, if that's what makes they feel comfortable and that's what makes them feel good, just keep reinforcing, make sure you wear your mask, make sure you wipe down everything. And so we just have to help them be extra cautious when they do that. But I do think I'm a little fearful about taking people's independence away who want to do it.
Right, because you can't treat your dad like a toddler, because after all, he's your dad, he raised you, right? And then I'm sure it would be just terrible for him to think, oh my goodness, here I raised you, but yet I can't go to the grocery store.
Right.
Finally, can you tell people who are watching, I imagine they can learn a lot more about this on Juniper. Tell us how to get there.
Yeah, so it's www.juniperunlimited.com, and there's plenty of resources on that site, whether you're an accidental caregiver, which a lot of us are right now, or you are in the high-risk population. We should have a home for you, and if you have any questions, they can always reach out, and we can try to help them as well.
All right. It's definitely, like I said, a needed resource in any time, but certainly during this pandemic. Maura Horton, Chief Community Officer for Juniper, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you.